Chapter 154, 154, A Declaration of War Part 3. John pushed open the changing room door, revealing rows of large matte gray electronic lockers lined neatly against the walls. It was still early enough that most of the Lucid operatives his age hadn't arrived yet, leaving the place in that comfortable silence John had come to enjoy. His own locker was tucked near the back. He ran his thumb along the cool steel of the lockpad, and the biometric scanner pulsed with soft blue light before releasing the latch. Inside, neatly organized, was his rune frame. The armor looked deceptively simple when idle, but it was a marvel of runic tech, able to protect operatives from many strong grim blows. He slipped into it piece by piece, the inner material cool against his skin. The undersuit sealed automatically at his wrists and collar with a soft hiss, each locking in with the muted clicks of magnetic seals. John exhaled, stretching his shoulders, feeling the weight of the armor settle comfortably. Despite its complex design, the rune frame moved as easily as a second skin. That was the beauty of Lucid engineering, high-tech precision merged seamlessly with modern engineering. He glanced at his reflection in the small locker mirror. John's hair was longer now, reaching his shoulders. But the greatest difference were his eyes. It had a greater depth. And every time he walked the dream, he felt like someone else entirely. Someone sharper, more deliberate. His gaze drifted down to the weapons rack. 2 swords rested there. Xuanhuan's was a blend of old and new, and sword reimagined. Its polished blade caught the room's light, running along the impossibly thin monomolecular edge. But what set it apart now was the glowing rune near the hilt, seemingly etched into the alloy itself. The small, radiant sigil resembled the shape of a sword, a faint golden shimmer that pulsed like a heartbeat. That was his sword rune. He had imbued it a while back into Xuanhuan's as a single-use rune, a trump card. If activated, the sword would split into multiple echoes that he would be able to temporarily control using his will through pure telekinetic extension, allowing him to fight with countless phantom blades at once. He hadn't used it, not once. John brushed his thumb across the rune's edge, watching the faint glow ripple outward. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing it was there, waiting, but he couldn't bring himself to spend it yet. It wasn't just sentimentality, it was practicality. Once he used it, it would be gone forever. Well, not forever. He could theoretically recreate it, but that would just be a waste of his time. That would mean getting rid of his teleport rune and making sword once again. To be fair, John hadn't needed it. The Dream Realm fights had been difficult, yes, but manageable. That was the point of a squad, Oscar's versatility, Ren's calm precision, and Nora's raw destructive power. Together, they covered each other's blind spots. They'd saved each other more times than he could count. He smiled faintly. Teamwork, it was something he could never underestimate. Next to Xuanhuan's lay his other blade, Lux Eterna. That one was sleeker, with a silvery white finish. The handle fit perfectly in his grip, its balance flawless. He holstered both blades onto the magnetic clamps at his back. Xuanhuan's slid into place with a reassuring click. Lux Eterna followed, locking just below it at a diagonal. Then, he strapped his runic pistol sidearm to his hip. For a moment, he stood there, just breathing, letting the calm settle into him. He was about to close the locker when the door at the far end opened. Footsteps echoed against the tile. John turned slightly. Cardin Winchester stepped into the changing room, his confident gait slightly muted by the quiet. The taller boy barely glanced in John's direction as he moved toward his own locker a few rows down. His brown hair was damp with sweat, like he'd just finished a warm-up session. John gave him a polite nod. Hey. Cardin didn't answer at first. He keyed open his locker, the hiss of the air seals filling the silence. Sup, he finally muttered, voice neutral. Disinterest. The two of them weren't friends, but they were comrades on a battlefront, which meant that they had a modicum of respect for each other. John leaned back against his locker, arms crossed loosely. You heading out for training? Yeah, Cardin said, pulling out his own rune frame. His was heavier and bulkier. Thick plates layered across the chest and forearms, with crimson tracer lines that flared when active, definitely customized for his fighting style. He began strapping it on, not looking John's way. A few seconds passed before John spoke again. Haven't seen you in the sparring rooms for a while. Been busy, Carden said simply. John smiled a little. Yeah, me too. They both knew what that meant. A while ago, Carden had asked him to spar. It a challenge to see his capabilities, but John had declined, mostly due to his schedule with Lucid swallowing almost all his free time. He hadn't seen much of Carden since then, except in the civilian beacon classes where they pretended to be normal students. Carden finished attaching the last piece of armor, flexing his arm to test the servos. His rune frame hummed to life with a low vibration, crimson light tracing across his shoulders. John found himself wondering what Carden's runes were. He knew the team was strong, peak rank ones, all of them, but he'd never seen them fight up close. The training sims had given him fragments, but not the full picture. You and your team still running missions with rank 2 operative, Kuro? Carden asked suddenly, glancing over his shoulder. John raised a brow at the question. Somewhat. We've been to a couple rank 2 zones, but lately he hasn't shown himself. 2 weeks since we last saw him, I think. Carden nodded, expression unreadable. Yeah, rank 2s are usually quite busy, but we've been doing our own runs under port. Impressive. Any interesting rank 2 zones you've been to? Carden frowned faintly. Yeah, one that sticks out was a submarine nightmare zone. That one was problematic. Bloody amalgamation kept spawning a ton of aquatic grim. Silence settled again, broken only by the faint hum of powered suits. Then, unexpectedly, Carden said, "That weapon of yours, you imbued a rune on it." John looked down instinctively at Crocia Moore's. The embedded rune caught the light, shimmering. Yeah, John said after a moment. It's called Sword. Don't really feel like using it up or submitting the rune to the researchers for them to test out. Carden didn't ask further. He just nodded once as if that was enough, then grabbed his helmet from the top shelf. Well, see you out there. John returned the nod. Yeah. Carden left, the sound of his boots fading down the hall. The room felt quieter after that. John looked back at his reflection in the mirror. Suit active, blades secured, eyes steady. John stepped out of the changing rooms, the door sliding shut behind him with a quiet hiss. The hallway beyond was mostly empty, only a few staff members walking past. His thoughts were still lingering on his greeting with Carden and his sword rune when... John! The sudden voice made him glance up just in time to see Yang striding toward him from the end of the hall, rune frame already adorned and golden hair practically blazing under the lights. Her expression was a mix of mild irritation and impatience. He raised a brow. Hey, Yang. Hey, nothing, she said, stopping in front of him with her hands on her hips. Why haven't you looked at your phone yet? John tilted his head. My phone. Yang rolled her eyes dramatically and let out an exaggerated sigh. Come on, we gotta go. Before John could get another word in, Yang grabbed him by the arm and started dragging him down the corridor. Her grip was surprisingly firm, metal gauntlet and all. Hey, wait, what's going on? John said, trying to match her brisk pace. Mission, Yang said shortly, not slowing down. John blinked again. Mission, like, a dream one, wouldn't be for later when we actually go to sleep. Nope. That made him hesitate for half a second. Real-world mission. Yang just gave a sharp nod, lips pressed in a thin line. That was interesting. Real-world missions weren't usually something rank 1 operatives got, mostly because they usually involved cleaning up spillovers impacting the real world. Grimm, unlike Awakened, retained all of their stats when they invaded reality. This was why real-world missions were usually meant for the higher ranks, the ones trusted to handle things outside the controlled environments of the dream realm. So why the hell was he chosen for one? As they rounded a corner, John wondered why Yang's expression was showing a look of irritation. Her jaw was set, eyes sharp and uneasy, probably not at him. All he did was not check his phone, which meant that this was something else. He had to confirm, however. You seem angry at me. Yang gave a humorless laugh. No, not at you, but yeah, I'm a little pissed. Did something happen? Yang didn't answer right away. Instead, she shoved open the doors to the cafeteria and led him inside. The Lucid cafeteria was half full. the usual mix of agents, researchers, and support staff scattered among the tables. The low hum of conversation filled the air, mixed with the smell of coffee and cooked rations. And then John saw them. At a table near the far end sat Xuanhuan, leaned back in his chair, black coat loose, and a plate of food in front of him. Beside him was RWBY, poking at a slice of toast while occasionally stealing bites from Xuan's plate. Next to Xuan, however, was a face John hadn't expected to see. Raven. Her long dark hair was tied loosely behind her crimson eyes half-lidded as she idly picked at her food. The resemblance to Yang was unmistakable, though her presence carried something colder, sharper. RWBY was clearly pretending she didn't notice Raven. Her fidgeting, however, gave it away, the slight tapping of her fingers on the table, the restless movement of her legs. She didn't usually mingle in the Lucid base like this. And when she did, she was usually in the form of a raven that perched on Xuan's shoulder. John glanced at Yang, who'd gone stiff beside him. Her golden eyes had hardened, and he could practically feel the heat from her frustration. So that's why. Raven's gaze flicked up lazily when the two approached. A faint smirk curved her lips, the kind that wasn't really a smile. Hello again, dear daughter. Yang didn't respond. Xuan, on the other hand, just waved his fork and intervened before things got heated. Good, you're here and dressed for work too, perfect timing. He shoved another bite of food into his mouth before continuing, his tone casual but firm. We've got a mission assigned by the big brass himself today. John blinked, big brass. Osbin, RWBY supplied, her voice quiet. That made John pause. Osbin assigned a mission to us specifically, what were the details? Xuan nodded, swallowing his food. Well, he assigned it to me specifically. But in any case, an interesting situation seems to have popped up in the real world, and it might. No, it is most like is connected to the dream. Yang's eyes narrowed. Is it another bleed-over event with amalgamations? Not really. Truth be told, I'm not even sure how to properly explain this. Xuan said, setting down his fork. So I think that I'll just try to get you up to speed on the way there instead. John crossed his arms. Right, so, you're bringing me RWBY and Yang along, why? Xuan gave a shrug. Because I was told I could bring a few students for field experience, so I chose you three. John arched a brow. Field experience in the real world. Don't look so nervous, kid. It's not a war zone, probably. Think of this as a reconnaissance assignment. We're going to observe something unusual. Raven didn't even look up this time, but a hint of a smile could be seen on her face. Oh, I do truly hope that it will be Warzone. That'll make it more fun. Yang's fingers twitched when Raven spoke. John noticed the faintest spark of flame flicker around her gauntlets from her new rune before she visibly forced herself to calm down. Xuan sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Let's all not start this again. We've got a job, and I'd like to keep my eardrums intact before we even leave HQ. RWBY finally spoke up, her voice soft but firm. So, where's the mission going to be, exactly? Xuan leaned back in his chair, eyes flicking between them. We're heading to a city in Vale, Belmont. John frowned. Belmont, that's south of here, right? About 7 hours away from here by car. Right, you are indeed, but we're not going to be taking a car. Yang folded her arms, eyes flicking toward Raven. And what's she supposed to do? Raven smirked faintly. Whatever I want. Xuan groaned under his breath. RWBY glanced between them nervously. Maybe we should get ready to leave. Smart girl, Xuan said, standing and slinging his coat over his shoulder. We've got a transport waiting in 10. Grab your stuff and meet me at the hangar. John nodded, mind already shifting into mission mode. Still, as they turned to go, he couldn't shake the sense of unease curling in his chest. A real-world mission, sanctioned by Osbin himself. Something about this felt big. Belmont City, whatever was happening there, he could tell already it wouldn't be simple. Chapter 155, 155, A Declaration of War Part 4. The bay was enormous, stretching out in a sweeping display of polished steel, suspended walkways and crane mechanisms crawling along overhead rails. Various areas even had rows of experimental equipment that most people could only dream about. If he turned around and looked upward, he could see the tall glass window high above, overlooking everything like an all-seeing eye. Ozpin's office. From here, the window seemed intimidating, like Ozpin was an overseer that could appear at any moment behind it, perfectly still and composed, sipping his mug of coffee while observing the entire hangar like a general at the helm of a warship. Being a rank 3, he probably could. John tore his eyes away and continued forward, following the designated walkway. The scent of machine oil filled the air, normal in this place. All around him was one of Lucid's real powers. Rows of specialized vehicles, humanoid mechs, Titan-class rune frames, stood in fitted docking stations like slumbering giants, black plates gleaming under the hangar lights. Each Titan frame was 4 times John's height, with reinforced limbs, runic plating, and weapons integrated directly into their frames. He'd only ever seen them tested once, from a distance, and even then, the sound of their footsteps made his chest vibrate. If the dream operatives failed to contain the creatures of Grimm in the dream realm, and all hell broke loose in the waking world, these Titan-class frames would be the last line of defense against the monsters of nightmare. These were meant for regular operatives to operate, those who weren't awakened. To John's right were aircraft prototypes, some sleek and angular, others bulky and transport-oriented. He recognized a few models: Valkyrie skimmers, Gremlin recon drones, and a few unnamed experimental ones he knew better than to stare at for too long. RWBY practically bounced with each step beside him, eyes shining. "Look, John, they added a 20th Titan frame. Oh my god, that's the V-model arm plating, look at the runic reinforcement. And the new recoil buffers on the shoulders." John smiled a little awkwardly. It seemed RWBY had much more knowledge of these things than he did. Considering that RWBY was a weapons geek, he supposed it was quite normal. It seems. Enthusiasm also extends to these guys too, huh? Yang snorted. RWBY had blueprints for a custom motorcycle in grade 8. This is sort of like her Disneyland. But Yang's tone carried a little tension, all of it still tied back to the presence currently walking several steps ahead of them. Raven Branwen. She moved with bored confidence. Someone as strong as her had few things left in the world to be impressed by, even while walking through the most advanced subterranean military bay on the continent. Considering that rank 2s were akin to strategic missiles, her attitude wasn't misplaced. Kuro walked beside her, holding a datapad in one hand. He was already half-strapped into mission mode, focused, alert, far more sober than his usual half-drowsy demeanor. "Over here," Kuro called without turning. John, RWBY, and Yang followed as he led them toward the left side of the bay, towards the largest craft in the immediate area. John slowed instinctively. It was impossible not to. The vehicle before them was massive, about the size of a large bus, but shaped compactly, like someone had taken a small house and streamlined it for flight. Its hull was matte black, reflective only in the faintest sense, the kind of material that swallowed light instead of bouncing it back. Its silhouette was smooth and predatory, with sweeping wings that angled backward and a pair of massive thruster engines built into its rear. A narrow row of windows lined the front, cockpit glass, darkened from the outside. RWBY let out an audible gasp. "Is that a no way, is that a bullhead?" Kuro grinned, clearly pleased with her reaction. "One of the newest models." Yang let out a low whistle. "I've never seen one this clean. When was it made?" "A month ago," Kuro said, stepping forward and placing a hand on the craft's chassis. "Ladies and gentle duckling," he nodded at John with a smirk, "meet the Bullhead MKIV, a marvel of Lucid tech. Speed, stealth, runic shielding, hull regeneration, and, well, a few surprises." RWBY was already peering under its wing. "How many weapons does it have, and what are they?" "More than you need to worry about, unless you plan on taking a joyride with Raven," Kuro said. RWBY squeaked and backed away. Raven didn't look up from the cockpit console she was checking, but John did not miss the faint smirk she tried to hide. Kuro clapped his hands. "All right, mount up, we're on a schedule." Inside, the Bullhead was even more impressive: sleek steel gray interior, folding seats, reinforced safety straps, and a central hollow projection module in the center aisle. Everything hummed quietly with stabilized energy. Kuro and Raven settled in the pilot and co-pilot seats, their harnesses locking with a mechanical click. John, Ruby, and Yang took their own seats behind them. Ruby strapped in instantly, vibrating with excitement. Yang strapped in more slowly, her jaw tight. John fastened his harness and exhaled. Outside, personnel were waving signals, giving clearance. Kuro flicked a series of switches, and the bullhead's engines came alive, a deep but quiet hum filling the cabin. "All right, kids," Kuro said, toggling the comm, "launching in 5. John felt the harness tight around him automatically. 4. Ruby clutched the armrests. 3. John swallowed. 2. Raven leaned back, unfazed. 1. Launch. The world jerked forward. Hard. The bullhead shot down the runway tunnel like a bullet through a railgun. John's back slammed against the seat, his breath catching with the sudden acceleration. Light streaked past them in long white lines. Ruby squealed in pure exhilaration. Yang muttered something loud, punctuated with, "Holy crap." In the cockpit, Kuro was laughing. "Relax, kids, she handles smoother than she looks." John wasn't sure he agreed. His stomach was still trying to understand what direction gravity currently wanted to pull him toward. Kuro's voice crackled over the intercom. "We've cleared the inner tunnel, opening surface tunnel in 5 seconds." John felt the bullhead tilt upward. The top section of the tunnel began to split open, mechanical plates retracting rapidly, revealing an upward slope ahead. Then, they broke through. The craft shot out into open air, rising several dozen meters instantly. John blinked against the sudden brightness. "Welcome to the outskirts of Vale," Kuro said. "Hidden hangar exit secured. Good work, team." Raven toggled a switch John didn't recognize. And then, the panels of the bullhead shifted. Or melted or something. From the outside, the matte black hull flickered, pixelated faintly, then became transparent, blending with the clouds behind it. Not perfectly invisible, but invisibility enough that from the ground it would look like nothing more than a faint shimmer. Kuro whistled approvingly. Camouflage engaged, engines to stealth mode, were ghosts in the sky. John stared. "That's incredible." Ruby practically vibrated in her seat. "I want one. Uncle QROW, can I have one, please?" "No," Kuro and Yang both said immediately. Kuro adjusted the flight path and turned the bullhead northeast. "We'll reach Belmont City in about 20 minutes, he said. John nodded slowly. 20 minutes. Just enough time for Kuro to explain what they were walking, or rather, flying into. He tightened his grip on the armrest. The interior of the bullhead hummed softly as the stealth engines stabilized their tone, smoothing into a near-silent vibration beneath John's boots. The clouds outside drifted past in long, slow curls, though outside was a relative term, considering the ship now blended with the sky so well that even John himself could hardly see the wings. Kuro tapped a few controls overhead, then leaned back in his seat, the tension in his shoulders shifting to a more thoughtful posture. "All right, kiddos," he began. "We've got 20 minutes, which means that it's about enough time to bring you up to speed. But fair warning," he glanced over his shoulder, meeting each of their eyes in turn. "This one's a little complicated, so we're gonna take it in steps." Ruby leaned forward in her seat slightly, still strapped in but already attentive. Yang crossed her arms, expression guarded. John straightened, bracing himself. It wasn't often Kuro said something was complicated. That usually meant something big. "First off," Kuro said, "let's start easy. You three remember the basic properties of runes, yeah?" They exchanged uncertain glances. Ruby answered first. Properties, I mean regular versus metatypes, and all that." Kuro gestured. "Well, not really, but you might as well go on." Ruby chewed her lip as she tried to recall the exact explanations from their training. Regular runes have literal effects. Fire makes fire, ice makes ice, shield makes a barrier. They do what they say on the label. "Right," Kuro nodded. John picked up from there. Meta runes are more abstract and conceptual in nature. They might not manifest in a straightforward way, like my weakness rune, for example. He tapped his chest lightly. The power doesn't manifest literally. Rather, it functions based on my understanding of weakness, which is why I'm able to remove stats from people and why it is called meta rune. Meta runes are also harder to create compared to regular runes. Two different people trying to create the weakness meta rune might instead form a different rune like decrepit, or maybe even fragility. RWBY nodded. Those who have meta runes also find it a lot harder to reach comprehension and mastery compared to those who have regular runes, but in contrast, meta runes are stronger. Kuro nodded at all of this, approving, but not necessarily impressed. All good explanations, correct, but not actually what I was asking for. Yang's eyebrow twitched, then why ask it? Because I wanted to make sure you hadn't forgot, Kuro said blandly, ignoring her tone. Now, what I really meant was the limits, how many runes an awakened can hold, and what it means to imbue one. RWBY brightened. That was easier. Rank zeros can create one rune, and when they rank up to rank 1, their existence, well, their soul expands and they gain room for another. 2 total. Right, Kuro affirmed, and when a rank 1 reaches comprehension in both of those runes, RWBY continued, through the nightmare system, they can rank up to rank 2, which expands their existence again, giving room for a 3rd rune. John finished the sequence. Rank 3s are a different scenario. To reach rank 3, an awakened would need to a state beyond comprehension in their runes. Mastery. Afterwards, they'd need to combine the 3 mastered runes into a single unified rune, creating what is known as a master rune. Consequently, rank 3s are also the highest rank achievable. Kuro snapped his fingers. Bingo and imbuing. RWBY answered quickly. If you generate a rune you don't want, you can imbue it into an object and discard it. Once it's imbued, it sticks to whatever you put it into. You lose the rune slot and are free to create a new one from the system. Kuro looked satisfied with that. Good, that's the standard doctrine, and the last part. Yang sighed loudly. If a rune is imbued into something, it can only be used one time. Then it disappears forever, or until you recreate it again, I guess. Her annoyance was clear. Uncle Kuro, why are we reviewing awakening classes? We're not rookies, you know. Silence settled. Raven didn't turn from the co-pilot screen, but John caught the slight pause in her fingers over the controls. Even she seemed to be listening more intently than before. Kuro's smile crept up, slow and almost too casual. Because, he said lightly, that last part might not actually be true anymore. All 3 teens froze. Yang frowned first. What are you talking about? Kuro tapped the edge of his datapad. A report was received from our Belmont base just yesterday, and, according to them, he paused, letting the moment hang. A proper way to make imbued runes permanent might have just been discovered. RWBY made a sound like her soul had left her body. John frowned, hard. Yang sat up straighter, the annoyance replaced by shock. Permanent, as in usable more than once. Truthfully, I'm not sure, but yes, indefinitely, Kuro confirmed. Not consumed, functional permanently. John's jaw worked, but no sound came out. It was RWBY who erupted first. How's that even possible? She leaned forward as far as the safety harness allowed. That breaks the entire foundation of the system. The whole reason awakened are limited to 3 runes are because imbued runes collapse after activation. That's why awakened can even fight creatures of Grimm, because awakened carry living runes, not dead single-use ones. It could change everything, John added, thinking fast. Gear durability, rune budgeting, combat strategy, weapon loadouts, even defense protocols. It'll change the damn world, Yang cut in, eyes sharp. Kuro nodded calmly. Exactly why we're needed. In truth, this knowledge didn't originate from Belmont's Lucid base. Yang raised a brow. It didn't, then where did it come from? Kuro shrugged, slightly evasive, though none of them noticed. I'm not sure, but Belmont was able to test it, and it worked. Raven interjected and finally spoke, voice cool and steady. For the first time in all of history, a core rule of the nightmare system has been rewritten. John felt a chill crawl up his spine. A rule of the system, rewritten. But how? RWBY breathed. Imbued runes are fragments of awakened intent. Without an aura or a soul to maintain them, they decay after use. That's fundamental. Kuro shrugged. Belmont scientists claim they found a stabilization method. They didn't give details, only that they have proof of concept and that it's reproducible. Yang's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Let me guess, something went wrong. Kuro gave her a dry look. We're flying out in stealth mode in a bleeding-edge aircraft to a city under partial lockdown. What do you think? John's stomach tightened. Ruby whispered, so what happened? Raven answered first. What happened is that we lost contact with the Lucid base in Belmont. A chill creeped up John's fingers as he clenched them around the armrests. What? Kuro didn't answer immediately. His silence was answer enough, but eventually he exhaled. We're not sure. All we know is that for some reason, the base in Belmont isn't responding. Yang's face was slightly drained of color. Could it be because of a rank too grim of some sort? Kuro shrugged, possibly, which is why we are here to investigate. John inhaled slowly, steadying himself. So, he asked, in summary, Belmont base discovered a way to make imbued runes permanent, and then something happened and we lost contact with them. Exactly, Kuro said, and we're being sent to find out if the two events are possibly related. Ruby leaned back, voice small. This is bigger than anything we've done before. Kuro didn't sugarcoat it. Yep. Raven looked ahead, her expression unreadable. Prepare yourselves. Belmont City isn't just another mission. It's a potential system-breaking anomaly. One Lucid cannot allow to exist unchecked. John nodded. Ruby steadied her breathing. Yang cracked her knuckles. The mission, suddenly, felt far heavier than the three of them expected when they boarded the bullhead. Chapter 156, 156, A Declaration of War Part 5. John felt the bullhead tilt forward as Kuro adjusted their course. The subtle hum of the engines softened, and the vibrations beneath his boots evened out as they descended. Through the translucent hull panels, the sprawling outline of the city of Belmont unfurled beneath them, consisting of low buildings, long streets, and dark patches of forest interwoven between neighborhoods like veins of untamed green. Yang leaned forward in her seat, squinting as the bullhead banked. Doesn't look anything like Vale, she said, tapping a knuckle against the window. Feels, I dunno, older, less shiny. John nodded. Vale's skyline was all shimmering towers and sharp silhouettes, steel and glass reaching as if hungry for the sky. Belmont, by contrast, looked closer to a painting of an old-school town that had grown a little too quickly. Lots of squat, blocky commercial districts, box-shaped warehouses with rusting roofs, old brick schools and offices, and winding suburbs of modest homes. Smokestacks rose here and there from small factories on the outskirts, and only a handful of buildings topped more than 6 floors. It looks kind of rustic, Ruby murmured beside him, her eyes bright with interest rather than judgment. But nice. Like the kind of place where every street corner has a bakery or a hardware store with a grumpy dad behind the counter. Yang snorted, or shitty dive bars. Please, Kuro said over his shoulder, not missing a beat. They've got great dive bars, and terrible ones. And one artisan whiskey place that is criminally underrated. People don't talk about it because they don't want anyone else to know. Wow, Yang deadpanned. Shocking, Kuro likes the alcohol. Kuro lifted a hand as if giving a lecture. I like good alcohol, which Belmont has. It's practically cultural heritage. Ruby ignored the banter, leaning forward to peer between the seats. Uncle Kuro, you've been here before, like for missions. Before Kuro could answer, Raven spoke in a matter-of-fact tone. We've been here 3 times. Her voice held no nostalgia or disdain, just information. She didn't look away from the windshield as she spoke. Due to the lack of awakened in the world, most rank 2s get rotated through different regions. Belmont's nightmare zones aren't as numerous as Vale's due to the population, but zones tend to be unpredictable, especially when it comes to rank 2 zones. Be thankful that the ones you've seen so far haven't been temporal ones. Those are a headache. Ruby's brows pinched. Temporal. Don't ask, Kuro muttered. Hard to explain. Raven continued. The last time we came through, there were 4 rank 2 nightmare zones. The base leader here wasn't able to handle it, so we had to step in and help. Fortunately, we stopped it in time, before the amalgamation spilt over into the real world. Barely. John swallowed. He remembered his own experience with an amalgamation spilling over onto the real world, and the deaths that followed. If he could help it, he never wanted to see such a sight ever again. That said, Raven added, eyes narrowing faintly, Belmont usually maintains good communication with Vale, and with Lucid in general. Kiro exhaled through his nose. Yeah, usually. The bullhead slowed even further, the sleek craft gliding above a lonely stretch of dry hills northwest of the city. The terrain below was quite barren, patches of scrub brush, dirt and rock formations that jutted like cracked bones from the ground. It felt removed from civilization, far removed from the city lights only a few kilometers away. Why here? Yang asked, unstrapping herself. Kiro flicked a switch. A soft mechanical whir hummed beneath them. Base entrance is just ahead. A rectangular hatch, big enough for 2 bullheads to pass through, rose from the ground like a metal lid being pried open. Dust and pebbles slid off the sides. RWBY blinked, so we're just gonna fly straight in. Nope, Kiro powered down the engines. Everyone out. That caught all 3 of them off guard. John hesitated halfway through unbuckling. We're not taking the bullhead in. Not if the base isn't talking back, Kiro said plainly. Protocols. If a facility goes dark, you don't bring an expensive aircraft straight into its mouth. For all we know, their system has malfunctioned, they've got hostile activity, or someone booby-trapped the landing bay. Booby-trapped? Indeed, we don't know the situation, so traps could also be a reason. John frowned. Grimm didn't create traps, only humans did, which meant there was a possibility that other humans were involved. And the only group of Awakened that John knew of that weren't a part of Lucid was the group his father was a part of. Sleepless. Yang muttered under her breath, oh, fun. Raven was already out of her seat. Come, children, from here on out we're going in on foot. They disembarked one by one, legs crunching on gravel and dried grass. The city of Belmont was visible in the distance, a patchwork of lights beginning to flicker on in the early dusk. The open hatch yawned before them, dark, unlit, and steep. A cold draft drifted up from the depths. John peered down. This is the Belmont Lucid base, entrance. Kiro folded his arms. Yup, one of them, for aircraft specifically, and to hide it from anyone who shouldn't know about it. RWBY tilted her head. So, what happened to the people inside? No one answered immediately. Finally, Kiro's expression hardened. That's what we're here to find out. Raven stepped forward. In one smooth motion, she dissolved into her shadow, then emerged. FWSH. In the unmistakable silhouette of a raven, the small shadow bird fluttered twice before landing on Kiro's shoulder. Its beady red eyes shone faintly in the dimming light. John still hadn't gotten used to seeing her use the ability. It was eerie every time. Kiro jerked his head toward the hatch. Come on, kids, stow the jitters and stay sharp. If the base is fine, we'll know soon enough if it's not. He let the sentence trail. RWBY stepped up beside John. He could see her fingers twitching restlessly, brushing the buckle of her equipment harness. Yang rolled her shoulders. All right, let's get this over with. The moment they stepped through the hatch and into the aircraft tunnel, the stale air wrapped around them like a cold shroud. The passage ahead stretched on seemingly forever. An industrial artery burrowed beneath the barren hills outside Belmont. Narrow strips of reflective lights dotted the ceiling at wide intervals, each one catching their silhouettes briefly before letting darkness reclaim the edges. For a moment, everyone simply stared into the tunnel's length, the scale of it settling in. John exhaled slowly. The silence here wasn't peaceful. Instead, it felt like the place had been holding its breath long before they arrived. Kiro stepped forward first. Let's move. Then they ran, an effortless, inhuman sprint only Awakened could perform. Their footsteps blurred, each stride covering meters at a time. Wind roared past John's ears as he kept pace behind RWBY, watching the reflective light strobe across her armor like red flashes on a dark canvas. No automated defenses activated, no turrets unfolded from the walls, no security drones tracked them. Nothing. The quiet only grew heavier. Eventually, the tunnel widened and opened into a hangar bay large enough to hold multiple aircrafts, though still smaller than Vale's sprawling underground hub. At least 8 Titan-class rune frames sat locked in their support docks, sleek humanoid mechs holding silent vigil, their armor plates glinting beneath the overhead lights. Power still flowed through the facility. Holopanels flickered softly, coolant vapors hissed from conduits, and ceiling fans thrummed at a lazy rotation. But not a single person stood in sight. John slowed to a halt. Yang came up beside him, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the hangar. "This is weird," she whispered. Weird didn't begin to cover it. The Vale branch always had personnel moving at all hours, mechanics, analysts, squad leaders, technicians. Even late-night shifts were busy. But Belmont's base felt like someone had pressed pause on reality itself. Everything was functioning. Everything was powered on and even operational. Except the people. RWBY stepped past a Titan frame, her hand brushing its leg plating. There's no way they'd leave these behind, even in an emergency. Especially in an emergency, John added quietly. Kuro didn't answer right away. His frown deepened, and he jerked his chin toward a corridor branching off from the hangar. "We're checking everywhere. Stay close." They moved together, tension simmering beneath every step. The first area was the simulation chambers. They were slightly different from Vale's. These ones were circular rather than rectangular, with walls lined by projection nodes. The interface was still active, humming faintly. A status feed floated above the control console. No users detected. Last session, 13 hours ago. Interrupted. RWBY swallowed. They stopped mid-run. Doesn't look like they stopped on purpose, Raven murmured. The armory was next. Racks upon racks of weapons, firearms, runic forge blades, shock gauntlets, thermal axes stood in disciplined formation. Lockers still open. Everything suggested people had been here just moments before. Everything suggested they'd stepped out expecting to return. But no one had. Silence followed them from room to room. The cafeteria was the worst. Trays remained on the tables. Forks still held bits of food. A plate of cold noodles sat under a heat lamp, half-eaten, as if the soldier who had been there had only left for a minute. RWBY stood rigid in the doorway, hands clenched at her sides. Yang's expression grew cold, jaw tight. John felt the back of his neck prickle. "This is," RWBY whispered, unable to finish. Raven stepped past her, eyes hard, not natural. They moved on quickly after that. The research labs were deserted. Terminals still displayed ongoing analyses. Rune compatibility tests, tracking, surveillance logs. One workstation showed a paused magnification scan with a note scrawled in the corner. "Return in 5 minutes." John stared at the words longer than he should have. 5 minutes could mean anything. 5 minutes before a break. 5 minutes before stepping out to help someone. 5 minutes before something happened. He didn't like the possibilities his mind conjured. They finally circled back toward the heart of the facility, the Central Intelligence Hub. The moment they entered, the entire group halted. The hollow screens were online, casting a faint glow over the room. Maps of the dream realm, fractured cities, nightmare zones, fog densities floated midair. A dozen feeds normally updated in real time, squad movements, connection statuses, grim activity. But every single one of them displayed the same error. Connection lost. RWBY's breath hitched, all of them. Yang stepped closer to one of the large displays, hands braced against the console. No uplink from any scout unit, patrol squads, or even the base interface. That shouldn't be possible. There are redundancies for the redundancies. John felt a chill crawl down his spine. So where is everyone? Kuro exhaled slowly, rubbing the bridge of his nose as though warding off an oncoming headache. "Well, it seems this is a bigger problem than I thought." The understatement felt painfully thin. RWBY turned to him, voice soft but tight. "Uncle Kuro, what do we do now?" Kuro turned away from the displays and faced the group fully, the weight of years etched onto his expression. His gaze moved from Yang to RWBY, from Raven to John. "There's one place left to check." Raven crossed her arms. "If they were dragged off by a Grimm, we'd see signs, so it seems that they might be in there." RWBY frowned. "In there, you mean?" Kuro nodded once, grim. "The dream realm." Silence fell like a hammer, dense and suffocating. John felt his stomach twist, not out of fear exactly, but in grim understanding. If an entire base had gone dark all at once with no signs of struggle, no broken equipment, no alarms, then maybe the answer wasn't in the waking world at all. Ruby's voice came barely above a whisper. Everyone, but how? Not sure. Let's check the sleep pods, just in case there are any technicians sleeping inside. Then the camera feeds. We'll re-roll the data to see what happened to the people in here. Chapter 157, 157. A Declaration of War Part 6. A long, low hum filled the air in the pod chamber room. Sound from the equipment reverberated off the walls, droning from machinery that remained fully operational. Rows of pod capsules stretched into the short distance, each gleaming with polished plating and dim interface lights. Normally, the room would be alive with quiet activity, attendants checking vitals, operatives climbing in, and technicians adjusting regulators. Instead, there was silence. John's armored footsteps echoed faintly as he stepped between the pods. Some capsules were open and empty, while others were closed. The ones that were closed should have had people inside, but the data on the pod showed something interesting. Error. No vital signs detected. Nothing. Unawakened technicians were definitely inside, Yang murmured, brushing her fingers over a control panel. But they're all empty. That means whatever happened probably didn't originate from the inside of the dream realm, or maybe it did. This is really weird and creepy. Ruby's voice trembled despite her attempt to steady it. They were all doing normal things. Raven's gaze swept across the chamber like a blade, and it appears that they all vanished, all at once. A heavy feeling formed in John's chest. This wasn't like any scenario he'd trained for. This was something that he'd never even ever heard of. There should have been alarms, warnings, or even distortions, something. But there was nothing. They were all seemingly untouched, as if everyone had disappeared out of nowhere. Kuro rested a hand on the edge of one pod, fingers tapping lightly as his expression darkened. We'll need to see the feeds, all of them. Raven nodded once. Let's go. They retraced their steps to the central intelligence hub, the soft whir of machinery filling the halls. John couldn't shake the sensation that the entire base was holding its breath, waiting, watching, expecting someone who would never return. When they reached the hub, Kuro went straight to the main console. With a series of taps, he pulled up the security feeds. A grid of camera perspectives appeared: hallways, cafeteria, armory, labs, hangars, even the tunnel entrance. Every room they'd visited, every room they knew was empty. Except 13 hours ago, they weren't. The timestamp read 5:01 a.m. Roughly 13 hours and 15 minutes before the current time. Ruby leaned in close, biting her lip. That's right before morning rotations. Before most people even have breakfast, Yang said. The video played. For a few seconds, everything was normal. People moving through corridors, analysts speaking over datapads, a squad of awakened individuals waking from their pods, coming back from a night patrol. A few unawakened technicians in the cafeteria, mid-conversation, mid-bite, mid-laugh. The ordinary noise of a fully functioning Lucid branch. And then they vanished. All at once. Every operative, awakened or unawakened, every technician, every staff member. One instant they existed, the next instant they didn't. Yang recoiled slightly. What the? Ruby peered closer. They just. Raven's eyes narrowed. Rewind it slow. Kuro's jaw tightened as he dragged the timeline back, zooming into the exact instant of disappearance. At full speed, it looked like nothing, just sudden absence. But when he reduced the playback to a fraction of a second, so slow it barely moved, a faint distortion appeared. John leaned closer, squinting. They're right there, on the cafeteria feed. Kuro sliced the other feeds into view, overlaying them. Every camera captured the same impossible moment. A flicker, a distortion in the air. And then an image, a single symbol, blurry, impossibly quick, barely comprehensible. Ruby stepped forward, brows furrowed. Is that a rune? It's too blurry, Yang muttered. Can't even tell the shape. No, Kuro said, we can. He rewound and paused the video at the exact frame, 1/20th of a second, then sharpened the freeze. The rune remained a little fuzzy, interfering with the lens as though reality itself refused to let it be clearly seen. But its general shape, its structure, its angles coalesced enough to take form. John felt a pulse in his mind, not painful, not overwhelming, but clear, precise, familiar in a way he wished it wasn't. He could read it. The sleeper's unwanted gift surged forward, knowledge unfolding like a page from a book he'd never written. His mouth parted. But before he could speak, two voices beat him to it. Displacement. John's head snapped toward them. Kuro had said it, and so had Raven. RWBY turned to them in surprise. Uncle Kuro, you too can read that. Yang blinked, looking between them. Since when? Raven folded her arms, her expression unreadable. Since long ago. Kuro nodded, though his eyes didn't leave the frozen frame. Most rank 2s are capable of reading rune script. Some things you pick up. John swallowed, the tension in the room suddenly thick enough to choke on. So they could read runes too. Was it the same as him? Given unwillingly, or learned, or earned? Before he could ask, the console flickered, not from malfunction, but as if responding to the frozen rune on screen. The blurry symbol seemed to pulse, once faintly, enough for John's skin to prickle. Displacement, Kuro repeated softly. A rune that forcibly transfers matter to another point, usually within limited range, but a phenomenon large enough to take an entire base's worth of people. His voice dropped. That's very unnatural, and definitely not part of the system. Raven's tone was icier than winter steel. Someone used that rune on every operative here, simultaneously, which is interesting. Interesting? John asked. Raven's tone at the end was a little off, as if she understood something greater. Kuro was the one who answered. Seems like the lot of you haven't realized yet, huh? All three, Yang, RWBY, and John looked confused. What do you mean? Let's put it this way. Even if the displacement rune was somehow used to transport everyone here somewhere else, what happened to the other members of Lucid, here? The technicians that were off duty, or the other operatives that would only be coming in later for their shifts or training? What happened to them? Why haven't they come into the base through the other entrances, and why did we lose contact with them too? Instinctive understanding rushed into John's mind. They are not here either, which means whatever caused this had a bigger range than simply the Lucid base. Kuro nodded. The range, I suspect, might be as large as the entire city of Belmont. John forced himself to speak. The idea of a city-wide displacement of people was concerning. But displacement runes, at least the way I understand them, don't work like this. They're short range. Individual, not mass scale. This looks more like. He hesitated. Kuro turned slightly. Like what? Like something only a rank 3 could possibly do, John said. RWBY shivered. A rank 3, Uncle Kuro, is that even possible? I thought rank 3s can't simply move as they want to in the world. Kuro shrugged, but an expression of clear worry could be seen across his face. That's if you're assuming the rank 3 is an awakened. It could be a grim. The three of them paled at that. More so Yang and RWBY. John knew from his conversation with Yang all those months ago that Yang and RWBY's mother, Summer, was killed in the dream realm from a rank 3 grim. Their father, who was also an awakened, was unable to do anything but watch. The only reason he survived was because a human rank 3 showed up to save the squads in the area at that time. Kuro, perhaps seeing the impact of his words on them, tried to reassure them. Don't worry. It's likely not a rank 3. In fact, if my guess is correct, this incident most likely ties into the situation of creating permanent imbued runes. How can you be sure? Yang stuttered out. Raven glanced at her but chose not to say anything. Kuro placed a hand on her head. I'm not sure, Firecracker, but don't worry. Nothing is going to happen to you, I promise. A soft chime sounded from the console. The connection's status attempting reconnection and failing repeatedly. Connection lost, connection lost, connection lost. Kuro finally stepped back, letting out a long, grim breath. We're not going to find them in this world. Raven nodded once. Everything points to the other side. RWBY looked between them, wide-eyed but steady. So, they're all in the dream realm. Kuro's expression hardened. Most likely. John exhaled slowly, the weight of what they'd uncovered settling over him like a shroud. An entire Lucid branch vanished, their disappearance marked by a rune that shouldn't exist at this scale. Kuro didn't waste time. "We're done here, we head back to the bullhead." Ruby blinked. "We're leaving now." "Yup," Kuro said, "and we're getting well outside the city radius before doing anything else. If this displacement rune goes off again, I don't want us anywhere near its range." "That assumes it has a range," Yang muttered. "Everything has a range," Kuro replied. "Even runes, but the more important clue," he lifted a finger. "We haven't lost contact with any other town or city nearby. That means this was an isolated incident, again very likely involving the permanent imbued rune issue." "Only in Belmont," Ruby whispered, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting the empty hall behind them to swallow the lights suddenly. "Only Belmont," Kuro confirmed. No one argued. They made their way back through the long tunnel, their footsteps echoing in the metallic corridor. John kept glancing at the overhead marker lights. He couldn't shake the image from the cameras, the way people had vanished as if the world blinked wrong. The bullhead felt unnervingly normal when they climbed aboard. The cockpit screens glowed, the engines whirred, the heating vents exhaled warm air. John strapped himself in and they launched into the air. The questions kept piling in his head like falling bricks. Eventually, he couldn't stop one of them. "If the displacement rune transported the Lucid operatives," he said slowly, "then why weren't regular people affected?" Outside the side window, he could see the lights of Belmont, cars moving along highways, neon signs flickering, people walking the sidewalks like any other night. The city was normal. Perfectly normal. Kuro didn't look surprised by the question. "Probably because the displacement was targeted," he said. "It didn't hit the entire city, just Lucid operatives inside the space." Yang frowned. "Grim don't target specific people." "Exactly." Kuro drummed his fingers on the arm of his chair, "which makes it 1,000 times less likely this was done by Grim." Ruby stared at him. "So, another awakened, or someone with access to some sort of high-level metarune." "No idea," Kuro admitted. That thought clearly didn't comfort him. Raven shifted in her seat. "We can debate that later. We need to prep for transit." "Right," Kuro said. "You three into the pods." John blinked. "The pod's here." The pilot tapped the dashboard beside him. A panel slid open, revealing 4 compact sleep capsules tucked beneath the bulkhead, military-grade dream transfer pods designed for field work. "These," Kuro said, "we need to reconfigure your dream anchors. If you fall asleep naturally, your dream selves will still spawn in Vale, not Belmont." Ruby grimaced. "Right, been a long time since I had to reconfigure my location." Yang nodded. "Same here." John could already feel the tension building in his shoulders. "So we're going to check Belmont's dream realm," he said quietly. "No point pretending otherwise," Kuro answered. "Everyone in this base is gone. Operatives don't just vanish. If they were displaced, they're either in the dream realm or they're transported to somewhere else on Earth." John exhaled slowly. He wasn't scared of the dream realm anymore. Not after everything he'd lived through. Not after the countless fights, the stat increases, the sleeper, and the training lessons. But this wasn't training. This wasn't even a simple nightmare incursion. This was something else. Something smart enough to target only the awakened. Smart enough to displace an entire base. Ruby placed a hand on the edge of her pod. "Let's see what's going on." John nodded and stepped into his. Their lids hissed shut. Chapter 158, 158. A Declaration of War, Part 7. John's eyes opened with a jolt inside of the pod. The dream realm version of it. The interior was dim, a world washed in bruised shades of red and black. The pod's cracked glass was fogged over with grime, webbed with fractures that hadn't existed a moment ago in the real world. Everything around him smelled faintly of rust and ash. "The hell?" John shoved upward. The pod lid didn't budge. "Right, of course." Dream constructs weren't powered. No electricity, hydraulics, or any clean mechanisms. Everything was dead, abandoned, and decayed. He braced his legs and kicked, hard. The lid snapped off its hinges with a shriek of tortured metal and flew outward, clattering across the bullhead's floor. The noise echoed in the hollow shell of the craft. "Us mine too," Ruby muttered from a nearby pod, followed by her own kick-thunk as her lid broke free. Yang punched hers open with a grin. "I totally forgot about this." "You would," John muttered. Kuro's escape was less graceful. His pod lid refused to break on the first try. He kicked it again, then a third time. Ruby blinked. "Aren't you way stronger than us?" "Dream equipment quality scales with my luck stat, apparently," Kuro grumbled, crumpling the pod lid open like paper. "Which is to say, non-existent, misfortune rune and all that. You know how it is." John didn't know. He had never created a misfortune rune himself. But from the way Kuro was describing it, it seemed like a hassle. John turned just in time to see Raven emerge from her pod in a swirl of black shadow, her body reforming on the metal floor with an almost liquid grace. No lid opening required. John let out a low whistle. "Cheater." Raven didn't dignify it with a response. He pushed himself upright and looked around. The aircraft that had been perfectly intact moments ago was now a half-rotted carcass. The floor was warped and eaten through with rust. The walls were split, torn as though by time and weather. Cables dangled like dead vines from the ceiling. Panels hung askew. A cold draft came from a massive hole near the back where the metal had disintegrated. And as they made their way outside of the bullhead, he could taste the familiar metallic tang of the dream realm. The air was stale and unmoving. The broken red moon cast its light like a sickly halo across everything. John exhaled slowly. He'd forgotten this part, waking up to a ruined environment. Ruby titled her head, brushing dust off her shoulders. "Makes Beacon's platform feel like a luxury hotel." Yang groaned. "Don't remind me. I got used to appearing in front of soft landings and working lights." John stretched, rolling his shoulders. "Same here, been too used to the Lucid infrastructure. The first time I came into the dream realm, before Ren, Nora, and Oscar found me, I had to wake up in my rotting bed and house." Kuro shrugged. "Yeah, that one's on me. I probably should have mentioned this before we hopped in." He scratched the back of his neck. "Sorry, muscle memory said dream pods work. I forgot we weren't in Vale." Raven snorted. "Forgetfulness is contagious in this family." "Hey now," Kuro began. But he didn't finish. Because his head snapped upward, too suddenly, too sharply. Then he swore, "Ah, crap." John didn't even get the chance to ask why. One moment Kuro was standing there. The next, he launched himself upward with a booming shockwave that shook the entire frame of the bullhead behind them. His body twisted midair, bones cracking in ways that shouldn't have been possible, limbs elongating, feathers bursting outward in a black avalanche. His silhouette widened, wings stretching, fanning, unfurling into the sky like the shadow of a nightmare. Kuro became the kaiju crow. And at the exact moment the transformation completed, the bloody light of the moon vanished. John stared. Above them, something vast and terrifying dragged itself through the air. It was a titanic shadow, with wings stretching wider than the streets of a city block. Its body easily the size of a 20-story building. Its eyes were like molten rubies glaring from a bird's skull head. A rank 2 nevermore. John had seen quite a few rank 2s now. Mostly amalgamations within nightmare zones, but even John had to admit. This thing was simply enormous. Kuro collided with the giant's beak before John could even inhale. The impact sounded like a meteor strike, an explosive crack of force so massive that clouds, if they existed here, would have been split in two. "Get down," Raven commanded. Her shadow rose from the ground like a tidal wave, forming a dense dome of black around them. The air pressure punched downward a heartbeat later. John barely managed to look up through the thinning shadows in time to see the shockwave hit. The sky turned white for an instant as the Nevermore's wings beat once, and the resulting blast shredded the hilltops for an entire kilometer in every direction. Trees disintegrated. Rocks fractured, and even the ground dipped like it was made of paper. The bullhead behind them didn't stand a chance. It tore apart, metal screaming as it was ripped into confetti chunks. Its engine blocks were flung like stones. John felt the force through Raven's shield, heard it more than felt it. It was a deep rumbling noise that shook his bones. A rank 0 with 10 in their body stat would have been seriously injured, and an unawakened would have probably died outright. But they were unscathed. Raven's barrier held. When the shadows melted away, the world had transformed. Everything the shockwave touched was leveled. A flattened wasteland of cracked earth and jagged trenches. Dust still drifted in the air like a settling fog. John's heart hammered against his ribs. Ruby swallowed. That was a rank 2 nevermore. No, Raven corrected quietly, looking skyward. That was a peak rank 2, a very powerful one too. Yang clenched her fists. What's it doing here? Raven's eyes narrowed with a sly look. Dear daughter, this is the Dream Realm's wilderness. Rank 2 Grim are more common out here than inside the cities. Yang scowled at Raven's way of addressing her, but she didn't rise to the bait. John didn't know what alarmed him more, the sheer size of the Nevermore, or the knowledge that things that strong were out there, roaming the vast majority of the Dream Realm. Above them, Kuro and the monster clashed again. Their forms collided in a storm of feathers, talons, shockwaves, and raw power. Kuro was a little smaller, but he fought like a missile with wings, ramming repeatedly into the giant's throat and eyes, trying to draw it away from them. He succeeded. The Nevermore beat its wings, and the resulting gale uprooted entire ridges. Then it angled upward, chasing Kuro into the crimson-lit sky like a dragon pursuing prey. The sky boomed with every strike, and John exhaled a quiet breath which he hadn't even known he was holding. They waited. Should we move further back? Don't bother, Kuro's strong enough to finish it quickly, probably. And if Raven said it, then that was the only correct answer. Above them, the sky was a battlefield of flurrying black shapes and cataclysmic shockwaves. Kuro collided with the gargantuan Nevermore again and again. Each clash rippled the air, warping the distant horizon into a trembling mirage. Kuro's form blurred suddenly, then split apart. 2 became 4, 4 became 8, 8 became 16. A murder of monstrous crows spiraled upward, each one as large as a building, each one diving, pecking, striking with unnatural precision. They shredded the air around the rank 2 behemoth like a storm of black scythes. The Nevermore shrieked, so loud John felt his vision vibrate. Ruby flinched. Thank God for body stats. No kidding, John commented. It's annoyed now, Raven said. Fantastic. The beast's body pulsed. Dark red lines spidered across its feathers, crackling, glowing, vibrating with malign energy. Its wings tensed. Its entire frame drew taut like a bowstring. Then, it fired. Hundreds of razor-like feathers exploded outward in a violent storm, each glowing with that same red-black energy. They tore through the sky with enough force to pulverize steel. So that's how a rank 2 Nevermore's rune feather looks like. I've only ever seen rank 1's, Ruby noted. Kuro handled it easily. His murder of crow bodies scattered instantly, spiraling and weaving in impossible patterns. Their wings flickered like broken shadows as they dodged the deadly barrage. Feathers screamed past them, carving trenches into the ground, detonating craters where they hit. The 3 of them, bar Raven, ducked instinctively, not that they were anywhere near the attack zone. Jesus, Yang muttered, those feathers would one-shot entire building. Raven gave a slight, grim nod. Rank 2 projectiles, he'll manage. But John could hear the faint irritation in her voice, and a hint of impatience. The Nevermore reared back, its enormous shadow blotting out the shattered moon again. For a heartbeat, it hesitated. Its monstrous frame expanded, twisted. And then split. Slightly different from Kuro, not as smooth or as clean, but still somewhat similar. It split apart like something was tearing itself apart from the inside. Its massive body ruptured into a cascade of smaller, but still horrifyingly huge, Nevermores. A whole flock of them, each the size of a 10-story building, each radiating that same rank 2 pressure. Come on, Uncle Kuro, beat that bird into a fried chicken, Ruby cheered. Yang stared upward. Is that flock? Yes, Raven agreed. Some have flock, beam, or rupture as their grim runes, very powerful. The Kuros swarmed the flock of Nevermore immediately. Dozens of monstrous bird bodies collided with dozens more. Kuro had size advantage now, but because there was a large flock of them, his advantage had turned into a disadvantage. The fight devolved into chaos. Dark shapes slammed into darker shapes, feathers ignited with crimson, wings shredded, bodies split further and further. Every strike boomed like a collapsing building. John stared in equal parts awe and horrified fascination. Each time he saw fights between rank 2s, it gave him a greater perspective of power. To this, that rank 2 might have been only a single step above. Yet, it was akin to vast chasm of capabilities. This would be the level his father would be operating on. This was the type of strength that John would require to have when he eventually faced him. And to think, rank 3s, were even greater, John shook his head. Those thoughts weren't worth it to focus on. The battle dragged on for several minutes, long enough for John to lose track of how many Kuros existed, how many Nevermores had been killed, and how many had split further. Finally, Raven sighed, a sound of mild annoyance more than concern. She lifted a single hand. Shadows suddenly pooled from in between the multiple crow's feathers, in the shape of monstrous hands with jagged claws, latching onto several of the rank 2 Nevermores mid-flight. Ruby blinked wide and asked Yang, "Did you know she could do that? Why should I care about what she can and can't do?" Yang scoffed out, though a hint of tantamount respect could still be seen in her eyes. The shadow hands squeezed. The trapped Nevermores shrieked and thrashed, pinned helplessly in the air. Kuro didn't waste the opening. His bodies split further, becoming a dizzying hurricane of black feathers. They swarmed the immobilized beasts, talons carving, beaks ripping, wings battering until one by one the rank 2s burst into miasmic dark mist. Less than a minute later, the sky was empty. The giant Nevermore, every single version of it, had died. Kuro descended last, his crow bodies merging midair until only one remained. He hit the ground with a heavy thud, feathers retracting, limbs reshaping. In seconds, he stood before them in human form, brushing a few stray black feathers off his coat. He looked annoyed. "Next time," he muttered, "someone remind me again that the dream wilderness sucks." Yang grinned, "You okay, Uncle Featherbrain?" "Peachy, but that damned fight took a whole 40% of my aura reserves." Kuro deadpanned. "Is that bad?" "Nah, it'll recover by the time we get to the base." Then he jerked a thumb over his shoulder toward the distant ruins. "All right, let's head into the city before any other rank 2s want to crawl out of the woodwork." Raven folded her arms. "It would be nice if you killed them faster." Kuro shot her a glare. "Maybe if someone helped sooner." "You had it under control," she said calmly. John whispered to Ruby, "Is this normal?" "Oh yeah," Ruby whispered back, "very domestic." Kuro ignored the commentary and walked ahead, boots crunching over cracked gravel. "Come on," he said, waving them forward. "The Belmont Dream City won't clear itself." John exhaled deeply and followed. Rank 2s, splitting monsters, and this was only the beginning. He'd have to get much, much stronger. Chapter 159, 159. A Declaration of War Part 8. After witnessing a rank 2 so massive it eclipsed the moonlight, splitting itself into an entire flock that blotted out half the sky, the word wilderness stopped meaning open terrain. It meant kill zone. So they ran. Kuro took point, kicking up gray dust as he carved a direct line toward the dreamscape silhouette of Belmont. Raven trailed a few paces behind him, sharp-eyed and silent. Ruby, Yang, and John followed close, sprinting across the barren plains with the frantic efficiency of people who knew stopping wasn't an option. Thankfully, no other rank 2s emerged from the gloom. Which was good, because any delay in their investigation would be problematic. But that didn't make the route safe. Not by a long shot. The moment they crossed the first low ridge, the ground trembled under their feet. Cracked earth bulged upward, and a rank 1 Beowulf the size of a compact truck tore free of the rotting soil. Why it was hiding in the ground, John didn't know, but what he did know was that it didn't even get the chance to snarl. Raven flicked her fingers, expression fixed and bored, and a lance of blackened shadow erupted from beneath the creature. The spear drove straight through its spine and pinned it mid-leap. It dissolved into gray ash before the corpse even hit the ground. A second rank 1, an Ursa with jagged, plating burst from behind a dead tree. Kiro didn't even pause. His torso twisted, his arm snapping outward in a practiced motion. Feathers detonated from his sleeve in a violent, shotgun-like burst. The projectiles shredded the Ursa's skull, scattering its mask into fragments. John sucked in a breath through clenched teeth. He had never seen Kiro do that. More Grimm converged as they pushed forward. Rank Zeros poured in small waves, dog-like Grimm, and smaller bird-like horrors that flew around on their malformed wings over the ground. Dream Realm variants were always uncanny and weird, like nightmares rebuilt from scraps that should never have been assembled. But Rank Zeros, at least, were manageable. Yang slammed her gauntlets together with a metallic clap, igniting a ripple of compressed force. The kinetic wave blasted outward, annihilating a cluster of charging creatures. They evaporated instantly, torn into drifting particulates. RWBY shot ahead in a sudden flicker of red light as her Excel rune flared beneath her boots. By the time she reappeared behind 3 canine Grimm, their heads had already been severed cleanly mid-motion. John held the flank, letting his peak body stat do the work. The first rank 0, a warped, hyena-like thing, leapt at him and collided with his forearm. It bounced off as if it had struck a steel beam. John stepped forward and planted a single punch into its chest. It detonated. A haze of gray floated in the air behind them as the squad finally reached the outskirts of the city, cutting through the last wave of lesser monsters on the way. Belmont rose before them, a sanctuary of broken streets and shattered windows. Yet no rank 2 shadows circled above, and no massive silhouettes prowled between the buildings. Only silence. Kiro slowed, letting the rest regroup. "Well," he murmured, rolling his neck and sweeping the skyline, "looks like we made it. The Lucid base under creation should be in the city center, so let's move." This was Belmont, their mission field. John wasn't sure what to make of the city in reality, but here it was eerie. "All right," Kiro continued, voice firming, "from here on out, stay tight. Watch your corners. Don't drift away from me or Raven. I'm not interested in any more surprises today." But as they advanced deeper into Belmont's shadowed outskirts, John kept expecting the city to erupt with Grimm. Rank 0 infestations were common in abandoned districts, and Rank 1s often lingered like territorial monsters. Yet the deeper they went, the more wrong everything felt. There were no Grimm. The scrape of claws across cracked asphalt and the distant silhouettes of Grimm peering through shattered windows were distinctly absent. Not even the twitchy movement of scavenger types lurking at the edges. Only the hollow howl of Dream Realm wind and the unsettling emptiness of derelict streets. Yang slowed, shoulders tensing. "Okay, this is either good news or the kind of news that comes right before a jump scare." RWBY lowered her voice. "If there aren't any Grimm, does that mean Lucid's still holding the area, and that they're, well, not dead?" Kiro didn't respond. His eyes were locked on rooftops and alleyways, searching, calculating. Raven mirrored him, hand hovering near her sword hilt, posture coiled tight. A few blocks later, RWBY whispered, "This is really weird. We had Grimm tailing us almost the entire way here. Now there's nothing, not even stragglers." "Exactly," Kiro muttered, "which is why I don't like it." But whether suspicious or not, the absence of monsters meant something important. If something was keeping the Grimm away, Lucid was still operational. And if Lucid was operational, the city hadn't fully fallen. Eventually, the city center came into view, or rather, what had replaced it. Where John expected the collapsed mall and skeletal remains of storefronts, there now stood a fortified, gleaming stronghold. He froze. The entire mall had been reforged. Massive bastions rose from former courtyards. Automated turrets crowned scaffolds like unwavering sentries. Steel walls wrapped around the plaza in layered, reinforced rings. Faint lines of energy pulsed along the plating, stable, orderly, unmistakably crafted. Creation's influence. Just like Beacon. John slowed instinctively, struck by déjà vu. The same visual signature. Pristine metal, futuristic edges, too perfect for the dream realm, was unmistakable. RWBY breathed out, "Whoa," they turned the whole mall into a base. Yeah, smaller than Vale's, but still damn impressive, Yang added. But Kuro and Raven didn't share the wonder. Both stared at the structure with tight, grim expressions. A chill crept up John's spine. Whatever they were picking up on, he was missing it, but he trusted their instincts enough to know it wasn't good. Raven exhaled sharply. That's a problem. Kuro didn't argue. As they approached the outer barricade, John spotted personnel patrolling the perimeter. The guard's gear immediately caught his eye, sleek, compact, and civilian grade. Not Lucid issue rune frames, no enhanced gauntlets, no bracing. Just standard tactical armor with minimal shielding. Not awakened equipment. And when the guards noticed the group, "Halt!" 6 rifles snapped upward instantly, all of them aimed at Kuro's chest. Not another step. "Hands where we can see them." RWBY startled. Yang froze with her hands half raised. John stepped instinctively in front of RWBY, pulse pounding. Kuro snarled, "We're Lucid, stand down." But instead of relaxing, the guards only grew more panicked. One slapped a console, and the nearest automated turret swiveled with a mechanical whir, locking onto Kuro with chilling precision. John's heart dropped. If they were Lucid personnel, why were they aiming weapons at Awakened? Kuro's voice hardened. "Where's your commanding officer?" Silence. The guards exchanged anxious glances. One swallowed audibly. Another tightened their finger on the trigger. Raven shifted forward by a single step. Half the squad of guards flinched like she'd thrown a grenade. "Easy," Kuro warned, raising a hand. "We're not here to start trouble." But the guards weren't tense, they were terrified. Terrified of them. As though Kuro and Raven were monsters approaching their gate, rather than allies. Before John could speak, a voice bellowed. "Stand down." A silhouette launched from the inner courtyard, hitting the ground with a thunderous impact that rattled the steel walls. A rune-framed man landed in a crouch, bulky, armored, unmistakably Awakened. And he looked like hell. Cracked plating, scorch marks, energy flickering unevenly along his gauntlets. When he pushed his visor up, the face beneath was gaunt, stubbled, and exhausted to the bone. His eyes widened. Kuro, is that, good God, it really is you." Kuro let out a slow breath. "Evergreen, yeah, it's me." The man sagged, as if something inside him finally unclenched. Relief washed through his posture like a collapsing dam. "Huh, you have no idea how glad I am to see you," Evergreen wheezed, dragging his helmet off. "I wasn't sure anyone from Vale was still coming." His expression twisted into something more complicated. Grief, shame, fear. He sighed and spoke with tiredness evident in his throat. "You'll have to forgive them. After our previous experience with Awakened, we're all a little on edge." Raven didn't let the silence stretch. "Previous experience? What happened here?" she demanded, voice sharp as a blade. "Explain now." Evergreen swallowed and gestured for them to follow. The steel doors groaned open, revealing the inner courtyard of the base. The moment John stepped inside, dread scraped down his spine. Dozens of Awakened lay scattered throughout the plaza. Some slumped on benches, others leaned against walls, others simply lay on the floor, armor partly removed to relieve the crushing weight of their rune frames. Their breathing was shallow, their eyes unfocused. Sweat clung to their faces. Discard bins overflowed with used stimulant patches. But the worst were the 2 unmoving figures. Rank zeros, judging by the fragility of their frames, eyes closed, bodies limp, completely unresponsive. Not sleeping. Unconscious. Comatose. Kuro's jaw locked. "This is erosion. Evergreen, why the hell are your people still here? They should have exited hours ago." Evergreen grimaced. "Kuro, they can't." Kuro stared. "Can't." Evergreen guided them past another cluster of shuddering rank ones. A few attempted limp salutes, but their arms gave out halfway through. "We were brought here suddenly, forcibly by a group of Awakened, not just those in the Lucid base, but ones all over the city as well," Evergreen said, voice low, "though we didn't know it was because of them at the time. However, we knew something was wrong. After killing a few Grim, we tried using the Dream Authority exit." He stopped next to the comatose pair. "But the system prompt wouldn't let us." Yang frowned. "Wouldn't let you, why not?" "When we tried to exit, it said, Dream authority exit, not possible. Evergreen rubbed his face, exhausted. No explanation, but we figured it out fast enough. We're here in our real bodies, not dream projections. There's no physical form back in the real world for the authority to return us to. Kuro's eyes darkened. That matches what we saw on the cameras. Seems we were right to take precautions of staying outside the city, after all. Your bodies physically disappeared. How long have your people been stuck? Evergreen's breath hitched. Around 13.5 hours. 13 hours. Far beyond the safe limit. John remembered the lessons, the warnings drilled into them. At 8 hours, spirit bodies begin degrading from nightmare erosion. Higher ranks resist better, but without intervention. Without intervention, this would end in tragedy. Raven knelt beside the unconscious rank zeros. She hovered her hand over one of their arms, close enough to sense, not close enough to touch. "They're fading," she whispered. Kuro pinched the bridge of his nose. "So the dream literally won't let anyone out. Tell me more about this group of awakened that you mentioned earlier." Evergreen nodded grimly. "They're affiliated with the Vale faction of Unawakened, Dragon's gang. From what we've pieced together, they pulled this stunt because of the situation." His words trailed off, hiding a hidden meaning inside. Evergreen's mouth then tightened. That group is desperate and reckless, and apparently willing to drag an entire base into the dream to make a point. We've been clashing against them for the last few hours, which is why our people have been on edge. Kuro's expression sharpened, the air around him seeming to grow heavier. The scale of the rune that was used. It shouldn't be possible without a true rank 3 master rune. Evergreen winced, not necessarily. A beat of silence stretched. Kuro and Raven exchanged a look, a quiet, loaded conversation in a single glance. Raven crossed her arms, shoulders stiff, a cold tension rippling off her like a pressure wave. Something about Evergreen's correction bothered both of them at a fundamental level. John, RWBY, and Yang glanced among themselves, completely lost. The adults weren't even speaking in riddles, they were speaking in missing context. And none of them liked being kept in the dark. Raven's voice finally cut through the charged silence, low and glacial. "Then we already know what we're dealing with." She turned her gaze toward the inner corridors of the base, toward whatever lay deeper, whatever was responsible for trapping dozens of awakened inside their own bodies. "Find the displacement user." Her eyes narrowed, burning with a hard, lethal focus. "And force them to send everyone back." Chapter 160, 160. A Declaration of War Part 9. Kuro exchanged a look with Raven, silent, sharp, and purposeful. Then he turned to the 3 younger hunters. "You 3 stay here," he ordered, voice clipped. "Help keep the rank ones stable, don't wander." RWBY blinked, W8. Yang frowned. "Uncle Kuro, where are you going on?" But Kuro was already moving. Raven followed without a word, her posture rigid, expression unreadable. Evergreen gave the trio a strained glance, something between apology and urgency, before motioning Kuro and Raven down one of the inner corridors. RWBY watched them disappear around a corner, the frown on her face deepening. "Did you hear what they were saying? They're clearly hiding something," she muttered. Yang crossed her arms. "Yeah, and they're doing it on purpose. My money is on it having something to do with the permanent imbuing fiasco." John didn't disagree. His gut was twisting the same way. Kuro and Raven didn't pull rank unless it was serious. Very serious. He exhaled slowly. "Let's at least try figure out what we can." The nearest non-awakened operative sat slumped beside a support pillar, boots off, fatigue obvious in the droop of his shoulders. His armor, while lighter than awakened gear, had slight scorch marks and scuffs everywhere. He looked up when John approached. "Hey," John said gently, "mind if I ask a few questions about what happened, about the Dragon Gang?" The man nodded tiredly. Yeah, sure, we're all in the same mess anyway." RWBY and Yang hovered close, pretending to check on one of the drowsy rank ones, but very obviously listening in. The operative rubbed his face. "Long story short, every single Lucid member in Belmont, awakened or not, got pulled into the dream. One moment we were in the base, or other parts of the city, and the next we were just dragged into here." John stiffened. even the unawakened. Yeah, that's the weird part. The man tapped the faintly glowing sigil embedded in the wall. Normally, non-awakened can't enter the dream unless we use the specialized sleep pods, but fortunately, because of our sync link in the sleeping pods, we manifested inside the dream base version too. Lucky break. Damn lucky, actually. Why? RWBY asked. Because the displacement rune should have spawned us in our real-world positions, which would have been on the streets, or in separate buildings, or scattered in grim territory. He swallowed. We'd have lost dozens, maybe all of us. Yang muttered, so the rune didn't work as expected. It worked, the man corrected grimly. But the rules of the nightmare realm interfered with the process, and I guess it just sort of determined that we were supposed to spawn here. Those who were in the dream at the time were also affected. Their real bodies somehow merged with their dream ones. He shifted, wincing as he displayed a badly bruised side. The displacement rune that their boss has, it's supremely monstrous. He's in his 50s, but still a full rank too. Evergreen fought him outside the base a few times now. Meanwhile, the other awakened in the gang tried to breach our walls. Guerrilla tactics, John asked. Yeah, hit and run. Ambushes fade into thin air whenever things turned against them. Displacement at mastery is unfair. RWBY shivered. Someone that strong is in this area, running a criminal group. Yang's jaw clenched. What do they even want? John nodded. Yeah, who are these Dragon Gang guys? What's their goal, and why go after a Lucid base? The man blinked at him, then stared. RWBY turned toward John slowly, and so did Yang. All three of them gave him the same look, confused, surprised, almost incredulous. John froze. What? Their expressions didn't change. It was clear that whatever he didn't know, he was apparently supposed to. And John felt the prickling of annoyance crawl up the back of his neck. Yang was the first to break the silence. She leaned in slightly, eyes narrowing at John as if studying some strange creature in a tank. John, do you seriously not know about the awakened factions? John's annoyance faded to confusion. Factions. RWBY's eyebrows rose. The operative staring at him mirrored the same baffled expression. Yang exhaled, long and dramatic. Oh boy. What? John sputtered. Since when are there factions? I thought it was just Lucid and random rogue awakened running around. Yang's lips curled into a slow grin, the you sweet summer child kind. Oh wow, you really didn't get the onboarding tutorial, huh? RWBY frowned thoughtfully. Wasn't this covered in the introduction when you first joined Lucid? John flushed slightly. Well, clearly I didn't pay attention, I didn't exactly get the normal process. Yang snorted, understatement of the year. She clapped him on the shoulder, nearly knocking him off balance. All right, Johnny boy, crash course time. RWBY nodded eagerly. Yeah, John, this is kind of basic dream realm stuff. The operative looked relieved someone else was taking over the explanation and sagged against the pillar again. Yang folded her arms, adopting her best, lecturing older sister posture. First off, Lucid. You already know they're basically the dream government. Their entire job is making sure humanity doesn't get eaten because some Grim decides to pop out of a sleeping kid's body. They regulate awakened, track nightmare zones, protect the dreamscape outposts. All that. Right, John said hesitantly. That part I get. Cool, Yang said. Now, the part you don't get. She held up a finger. There are awakened who don't want to join Lucid. John nodded. Yeah, I figured there'd be a few lone wolves. Yang shook her head. No, I mean, there are a decent few of them. Entire groups of awakened who flat out refuse to operate under Lucid oversight for plenty of reasons. Some ideological and some personal. And some simply because they don't like authority. Among them, crime tends to be something that they get involved with. That seems like a pretty big problem, John muttered. Don't get me wrong, there's not so many of them that Lucid can't handle them, but there is still a decent amount. Yang agreed. In any case, some of these people form their own factions. Gangs, independent awakened syndicates. Call them whatever you want, but they're powerful and dangerous, and Lucid can't just bulldoze them without causing a worldwide supply chain and political meltdown. RWBY added quietly, and because they're awakened, mortal gangs don't stand a chance against them. They took over the underworld ages ago. Yang leaned against a metal support beam. So every kingdom has at least one major awakened gang running the shadows, except Mistral. Why not Mistral? John asked. Because, Yang said, the rank 3 that is stationed there is, well, a monster. RWBY nodded. Unofficially, people call him the strongest awakened alive. John's eyes widened. Stronger than Ospin. Yang nodded reverently. That guy is a walking natural disaster. Mistral's underworld won't even be able to breathe unless he lets it. But that's a story for another day, RWBY added. Yang snapped her fingers and pointed at John. Back on topic, the Dragon Gang. The operative groaned at the name. RWBY winced. Even Yang's smile dimmed a bit. They're the awakened gang of Vale, Yang explained. They run the underworld and don't let any other gang or small awakened factions take over their territory. If lone awakened exist, they usually get absorbed by them. Lucid monitors them, but they're slippery. A lot of their activity goes unpunished because by the time Lucid responds, the gang's already vanished. But beyond that, some of their activities are low-key, allowed. John frowned. I see. Criminal being allowed to complicit their activities, huh? Better the devil you know than that which you don't. You get me. I get the notion, but they're that strong. Strong enough to hold Vale's entire criminal ecosystem under their thumb, Yang said, and smart enough not to provoke Lucid directly. At least not openly. RWBY tugged lightly at her cloak. And if they are here, directly causing trouble to a Lucid base, well, that's not normal. At all. Lucid is likely to retaliate against them heavily because of this. John's brow furrowed. The man Evergreen fought, he said the leader had a displacement rune, right? Master rune level, that's someone high up then, the leader. The operative, listening despite his exhaustion, spoke up faintly. Not the leader, just a sub-leader. One of the commanders, the real boss, you don't ever want to meet him. Yang whistled low. Sub-leader, that's still really bad, worse than I thought really. RWBY bit her lip. If a sub-leader is here, what do they want? The man hesitated before answering. What do awakened criminals always want? Power, runes, lucid tech, territory. But this time, his eyes flicked toward the corridor where Kuro had gone. This time it's something big. Big enough they'd risk a full-on war with Lucid if they get caught. Yang nodded slowly. Yeah, that tracks. Then her expression sharpened, and she grabbed John's arm. Come on. He jerked a little. Huh, what? We're leaving, Yang said. Not out of the base, but away from the injured. I want to talk without ears around. She pulled both John and RWBY to a shadowed corner near a barricade of stacked supply crates. RWBY glanced around to ensure no one was close enough to overhear. Then Yang dropped her voice to a whisper. Permanent imbuing. John stiffened. RWBY's eyes widened. Yang continued. Look at the timing. A permanent stat-boosting method suddenly exists. Kuro and Raven treat it like world-ending news. And then, bam, the Dragon Gang storms a Lucid base within the same week. John whispered, you think they found out about it? Yang lifted her hands. I don't think, I know. Criminal awakens sniff out opportunities like sharks smell blood. John folded his arms, a pit forming in his stomach. If they get their hands on permanent imbuing. Yang finished the thought grimly. They won't just control the underworld anymore. They'll control everything. RWBY swallowed. So that's why Kuro and Raven are acting weird. Yep, Yang nodded. They don't want us involved in this part. Not yet, because if Dragon Gang really wants imbuing, that means this isn't just a Belmont problem. Her voice dropped even lower. It's a global one. And John felt the weight of those words settle, like lead in his bones. Ongoing. This audiobook is in progress and stopped at chapter 160. Xuanhuan members can request an update in the following update request post or by sending me a message.